Hello, my name is Angelica Guerra, and today we are going to be talking about mirror and window books, why representation matters. First, I want to start by explaining the origin of referring to books as mirrors and windows. Windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors is a phrase coined by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop to illustrate and explain the importance of representation in the books children are exposed to or have access to. Books can be windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. Books can be windows when they provide the reader a look into a different world and different experiences from the ones they are exposed to. Books can be mirrors when the reader sees themselves and their experiences in the book. Window books become sliding glass doors when readers with a little imagination walk through these doors and experience the feeling of being in somebody else's shoes and realize we are not all so different. So, what role do mirror and window books play in the classroom, and why is representation important? We are all aware of the lack of representation in many aspects of our lives, especially if you're a person of color, a woman, or if you fall into a different category other than the one society placed you in. Most of the time, that is no different in the classroom. For many years, children have been read the same stories with the same protagonists and experiences. Many students never saw someone that looked like them in a book growing up. Many never really connected to the experiences of the character in the book. Not until recently have teachers begun to tackle the lack of representation in the classroom. In a study in 2008, there was shown a vast difference in representation across books published that year. 1% of the books published that year depicted American Indian First Nations, 5% depicted Latinx, 7% depicted Asian Pacific Islander or Asian Pacific American, 10% depicted African American or African, 20% depicted animals or other, and 50% depicted white. It is important to tackle the lack of representation in the classroom because both people that are part of minority groups and those from dominant social groups have been found at a disadvantage due to this lack of representation, and using books as mirrors and windows is a start. Dr. Bishop explains how students from dominant social groups are left at a disadvantage when provided mirrors and more mirrors, but never windows. They are left with this false sense of the world. They lack exposure to other groups of people, leaving them unprepared for the real world, where they will meet people that are different from them. They lack opportunities to learn and understand those around them. A proper education should prepare you for the real world and provide you with as much skills as you might need. We teach students to be good citizens, and that includes being respectful, but we don't always teach them the vast differences there can be among people. They could go out into the world and encounter people with different beliefs, religions, traditions, languages, and colors, and they will not know how to respond adequately. A dominant culture is prevalent in literature, often leaving outside groups feeling invalidated and giving a false sense of superiority to those in dominant social groups. Books can help students learn about the history and traditions of different groups of people. The more they learn about others, the more willing they will be to embrace people's differences because they will learn from a young age that there are differences and that is okay. We are all people and can reach an understanding. Studies like the AC360 doll study show clearly the stereotypes students hold at a young age. Representation in books can help change opinions and stereotypes students might have coming into the classroom. It can humanize a person and give another point of view they otherwise might have not been exposed to. We are all aware of the dangers of a single story. People of color get windows and more windows, but never mirrors. Children grow up with books that don't show their skin color or experiences, leaving them feeling marginalized. When they do appear, they are often shown in a negative light or just a minor character. How are students supposed to grow up and find their place in society when their instruction never validated their experiences or made them feel seen? Dr. Bishop explains how books can be a source of self-affirmation for children. Children need to see themselves in the books they read to develop emotionally in a healthy way. Students can grow ashamed of their experiences, families, and bodies when they never see any of these correctly represented in the books they read. Learning becomes uninteresting when all they ever analyze are characters unlike them, places they have never been to, and experiences they can't connect to. Lastly, a lack of diversity leads to crushed dreams. The world seems full of limitations to students that don't see people like them doing and accomplishing things they once dreamed of. Overall, literature that provides windows and mirrors is important because they help students from dominant and minority groups understand themselves and those around them. How do we incorporate mirror and window books into the classroom effectively? We can bring in books that have a variety of protagonists from different groups, but that is not enough. Incorporating mirror and window books into the classroom comes with great responsibility. Firstly, teachers need to know their students well. When thinking of books as windows, we need to consider who our students are, their interests, curiosities, and levels of prior knowledge. When thinking about books as mirrors, we need to consider our students' funds of knowledge, intersectionality in the classroom, how students see themselves, as well as activities we can design for students to explore their identities. We also need to teach about race, culture, and identity, and what each of these are. Young students are well aware of these, but they are young. They don't always have the words or terms for what they see. Growing up, children are well aware of the situations and relationships around them. Helping them understand these terms will help them really dissect the readings presented to them. You can then ask students if the book is a mirror or a window book for them and why. As students answer these questions, they will become more and more familiar with differences in race, culture, traditions, and family dynamics. Reading now becomes about learning about you and others, and not just something you have to do because you go to school. This can transform a student's idea of reading. And you also need to remember to be open to uncomfortable situations and address them if they come up. Additionally, mirror and window books require critical literacy in the classroom in order to be used effectively. Critical literacy can help students dive deeper into what they are reading and not just accept the story or information as it is. Students can analyze a range of perspectives. There are many questions you can ask students to help them analyze a book. For example, who is the author and what is their perspective? How does my perspective affect my interpretation? Whose perspective hasn't been heard? Lastly, using mirror and window books effectively in the classroom requires interdisciplinary teaching. We need to ask questions and integrate activities that cover state standards while connecting to what we are learning and developing students' identities and embracing the differences that arise when learning about one another. Incorporate diverse books across academic subjects. Don't read a book with a protagonist of color only on diversity day or week. Don't make it a specific diversity unit. We can use different activities like reading a book about identity and having students write about what makes them who they are and share with the class or in partners. This develops writing and communication skills as well as identity. We can use a book and connect it to math and STEM or even history. A study by Katie Shruba, the director of Sanford Education Programs at National University in La Jolla, California, revealed two main things that engage readers of color, more specifically male students of color. Those were empathetic relevance, relating to the book due to similar experiences, and sympathetic relevance, being able to understand and experience or live it through the text. Constructivism also supports the use of mirror and window books. Constructivism holds a belief that children build understanding from their experiences. If children never see themselves in books, it will be harder for them to develop their identities. Using books with a variety of protagonists covering a variety of topics can help students connect to those books and build their understanding. When children, especially young ones, don't connect to something, it is hard for them to grasp and quickly forget it. Children from dominant social groups who never experience or learn about people that are different from them will not have a base of understanding of these differences, making it harder for them to accept others as they grow up. What do critics have to say? Sometimes we can encounter foggy mirrors as attempts to find mirrors. This happens when the protagonist finally looks like you, but their interests and experiences are nothing like yours, leaving your experiences and your identity invalidated. This is why it is important for teachers to consider and get to know the group of students they have. Books can also be limited windows, showing only a side story or a stereotypical idea of a group or tradition. When we want to use books as mirrors or windows for our students, we have to be careful of what narratives you are bringing to the classroom. Stereotypes are often found within children's literature. Incorporation of diverse books to the classroom can make people feel that it is enough. when it is far from it. Like we have seen, it takes more than just adding them to your library to use them effectively. Lastly, teachers often feel like they have to give up time or a unit to cover diversity now. We know this is not the case if we incorporate these books effectively throughout our instruction and not just make it a unit. My personal connection to personal philosophy towards elementary education is that I believe that it is extremely important to have representation in my classroom. Students need to feel welcomed and comfortable in the classroom to have the opportunity to learn effectively. I also want my students to have a strong self-efficacy. In order to develop strong self-efficacy, students need to feel comfortable with themselves and their identity. I want to help my students embrace those differences and I think using a diverse range of books can be of great help. Like we have seen, a lack of representation leaves students from minority groups feeling unwelcomed and even ashamed, and it leaves students from dominant social groups unprepared for the real world. My goal is to help my students feel comfortable and confident in their learning abilities as well as themselves. So mirror and window books are a great tool for reaching my goal. Here are the resources that I used to complete this project. Thank you for your time.